We talking about practice. Practice. Not the game, but practice. These words echoed through the NBA world on May 7, 2002. Allen Iverson, one of basketball's biggest stars, sat in front of reporters, repeating the word practice over 20 times. His voice filled with emotion, his eyes showing frustration. But this wasn't just another press conference. This was the moment that would be played over and over for the next 20 years. But here's what most people don't know. That day, Iverson wasn't just talking about practice. He was a man dealing with pain, pressure, and personal loss. The Philadelphia 76ers had just finished a disappointing season. Just 1 year earlier, Iverson had led them to the NBA Finals, winning MVP along the way. He was on top of the world. Now, everything was falling apart. The practice rant wasn't just about basketball. It was about a superstar trying to tell the world something deeper. While fans were laughing and the media was creating headlines, they all missed the real story. They missed the pain in his voice when he said, "I'm supposed to be the franchise player, and we're in here talking about practice." What happened that day changed how we see NBA stars forever. It wasn't just about a player losing his cool. It was about the pressure of being a superstar, about dealing with personal tragedy, and about a system that sometimes forgets these athletes are human too. Today, we're going to tell you the real story. Not just what you saw on SportsCenter. Not just the funny memes and video clips. We're going to show you what really led to this moment, why it happened, and how it changed the NBA forever. This is the untold story of the most famous press conference in basketball history. Before we get into what really happened that day in Philadelphia, we need to go back. Back to understand who Allen Iverson was, what he meant to basketball, and why this moment was bigger than just practice. Context setting section. Let's take it back to 2002. The Philadelphia 76ers weren't just any team, they were Allen Iverson's team. Just a year before, they had done something special. Iverson, standing barely 6 feet tall, had carried his team all the way to the NBA Finals. He was named MVP that year, crossing up defenders, scoring over giants, and playing every game like it was his last. But 2002? That was different. The Sixers were struggling. After making it to the finals the year before, they couldn't even get past the first round of the playoffs. The team that had been on top of the basketball world was now just another team trying to find their way. And then there was Coach Larry Brown. Brown was old school, he wanted things done his way. Practice wasn't just practice to him, it was where championships were built. But Iverson? He had his own way of doing things. He played through injuries, gave everything in games, but practice? That was complicated. What most people don't know is what was happening in Iverson's personal life. His best friend had just been killed. While the media was focused on missed practices and team drama, Iverson was dealing with real loss. He was hurting, not just as a player, but as a person. The pressure was building. Every day, reporters would ask, "Why isn't the team winning like last year? Why isn't Iverson at practice? What's wrong with the Sixers?" The questions kept coming, but nobody was asking how Iverson was really doing. Think about it, this was a guy who was supposed to be the face of the NBA. He changed the game with his style, his cornrows, his tattoos. Kids wanted to be like him. But the same things that made him popular also made him a target. Every move he made was watched, every mistake was highlighted. This wasn't just about a superstar missing practice. This was about a human being pushed to his breaking point. The story of what happened next would change how we look at NBA players forever. But to understand that moment, you had to understand everything that led up to it. This is where our story really begins, the day before the most famous press conference in NBA history. A day that started like any other but would end up changing everything. The day before section. May 6, 2002. The Sixers season had just ended with a disappointing loss to the Boston Celtics. The locker room was quiet. Players were packing up, knowing some of them wouldn't be back next season. But the real drama was happening in Coach Larry Brown's office. Iverson walked into that office for what was supposed to be a normal end-of-season meeting. But this wasn't going to be normal. Brown wanted to talk about practice, again. The same conversation they'd had 100 times before. But this time was different. This time, Iverson had reached his limit. Nobody knows exactly what was said in that room. But we know this, Iverson walked out frustrated. The media was waiting outside, like they always did. Cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions. Allen, why didn't you make practice? Allen, what's wrong with the team? Allen, what did Coach Brown say? That night, the Philadelphia media did what they always did, they wrote their stories. Iverson skips practice again. Sixers star clashes with coach. Is this the end for AI in Philly? The headlines kept coming. But none of them knew what was about to happen the next day. What they didn't write about was how Iverson had played that season. He played through injuries. He averaged almost 40 minutes per game. He was scoring 31 points a night, leading the league. But all anyone wanted to talk about was practice. The pressure was everywhere. His friend's death was still heavy on his mind. The team was losing. The media was constantly on his back. And now, after another tough meeting with Coach Brown, something had to give. That night, something changed in Iverson. Maybe it was the meeting. Maybe it was all the headlines. Maybe it was just everything building up over months and years. But when he walked into that press conference the next day, he wasn't just Allen Iverson, the basketball player. He was a man ready to let the world know exactly how he felt. Nobody in that room knew they were about to witness one of the most memorable moments in sports history. They thought it would be just another press conference. They were wrong. Dead wrong. The Rant Breakdown section. May 7, 2002. The press room was packed. Nobody expected anything special. Then Iverson walked in, and everything changed. It started with a simple question about practice. That's when Iverson let loose. I'm supposed to be the franchise player, and we're in here talking about practice. His voice was rising. Not a game. We talking about practice. But here's what most people miss when they watch that clip. Look closer at Iverson's eyes. Listen to his voice. This wasn't just anger, this was pain coming out. Every practice, he said, wasn't just about missing workouts. It was about everything. The pressure. The criticism. The personal loss. It was all coming out at once. I'm hurt. Everybody knows I'm hurt. These words got lost in all the practice quotes. But they were important. Iverson wasn't just talking about physical pain. He was talking about emotional pain. About losing his friend. About feeling misunderstood. Immediate aftermath section. The moment Iverson walked out of that press room, everything exploded. Within hours, sports networks were playing the clip non-stop. Practice became more than a word, it became a national joke. Everyone had something to say about it. But the reactions? They were all over the place. Some media people ripped into Iverson. This is everything wrong with modern athletes, they said. He doesn't care about getting better. He's setting a bad example. They took his words and used them to paint him as the bad guy. Inside the Sixers organization, things were tense. Coach Larry Brown watched the press conference and saw something different. Later he said, "I love Allen Iverson." He knew this wasn't just about practice. This was about a player dealing with too much at once. Iverson's teammates? They stood by him. They knew the real AI. They saw him play through injuries. They saw him give everything in games. Aaron McKee, Iverson's close friend on the team, said it best, people don't understand what AI was going through. They just saw what they wanted to see. The fans were split. Some defended their superstar, saying he earned the right to practice how he wanted. Others worried he was destroying the team's culture. But something interesting happened. The more people watched the full press conference, not just the practice clips, the more they started to understand. Even other NBA players started speaking up. They knew the pressure. They knew what it was like to have every move watched, even though many weren't even born when it happened. Iverson himself talks about it differently now. In recent interviews, he's laughed about it. But he's also explained what was really going on, the pressure, the pain, the frustration. He's proud that he spoke his truth, even if people didn't understand it at the time. Today's media coverage of NBA players is totally different. Reporters ask about players' lives outside basketball. They talk about mental health, personal struggles, real issues. That change started with Iverson showing that athletes are more than just sports machines. The practice debate has changed too. Look at load management today, teams actually making stars sit out games to rest. Imagine telling that to someone in 2002. Times have changed, and we understand now that there's no one right way to be a great player. Young players coming into the NBA today have more freedom to be themselves because of moments like this. They can speak their minds, show their personalities, be real people, not just basketball robots. The practice rant isn't just a funny moment in NBA history anymore. It's become something bigger, a moment when sports culture started to change. When players started to be seen as real people. When being honest became more important than being perfect. Conclusion section. So what's the real story of Allen Iverson's practice rant? It's not just about a superstar complaining about practice. It's about something much bigger than basketball. Think about it. In just 4 minutes, Iverson changed how we look at NBA stars forever. He showed us that behind every highlight reel, behind every crossover, behind every big game, there's a real person. Someone dealing with real life, real pain, real pressure. The headlines back then got it wrong. They focused on the word practice and missed the real message. They missed a man trying to tell the world that there's more to life than just basketball. They missed the pain in his voice when he talked about his friend. They missed the frustration of someone who gave everything on the court but still couldn't make everyone happy. Today, when we see NBA players speaking their minds, standing up for what they believe in, showing their real selves, that's part of Iverson's legacy. He didn't just change the game with his crossover. He changed it by being real when everyone else was fake. Remember this, Iverson played every game like it was his last. He jumped into crowds for loose balls. He took hits from players twice his size. He led the league in minutes. He played through injuries. And yes, maybe he missed some practices. But he changed what we thought was possible in basketball, and then he changed how we talk about the game itself. 20 years later, people still say, "We talking about practice," and laugh. But now they also understand what Iverson was really saying. That sometimes, the biggest moments in sports aren't about sports at all. They're about being human. That's the untold story of the practice rant. Not just a funny moment, not just a meme, but a turning point in how we see athletes. A moment when one of basketball's biggest stars reminded us that even heroes are human. And that's why this story still matters. Because in the end, we weren't just talking about practice. We were talking about something much more important than that.